Whenever we want to talk about SharePoint libraries, we of course need to talk about metadata, or columns, or fields, but we also need to talk about those attached files that go along with them. In order to do this, we're going to break this down into three separate sections. And it's not really because they're that much different, but there are a few differences with the different types of libraries. So you may notice that our structure has changed a little bit. We just kind of did this to make it easier to follow through this particular portion of the training. We have all of our libraries currently listed at the top of the quick launch. There's a document library, there's a picture library called corporate images, there's a slide library called training slides, and there's something called an asset library that we have named internal training videos. We're going to be using all of these as we work through the remaining sections of working with libraries, starting of course with the most common, which is a document library. The default name for a document library is called shared documents. But remember, your document library or document libraries, there may be more than one, could have any variety of names. They don't have to have the default names that come with SharePoint. In any event, we'll go ahead and give this a click or a tap and get into our library. The first thing we want to take a look at is the fact that this is very similar to a list. We have the title at the top. We have a variety of links like adding new things or uploading, which we'll be talking about. We have any variety of views that will be appropriate and the ability to search within the library. We also have different columns or fields. In the case of a document library, the fields include name, when it was last modified, and who it was last modified by. You may have different fields if your libraries have been customized. We can also see that we have entries. Now, in some ways, these are just like the entries in a list. If we pause over them, we see that they're a hyperlink. And just like in a list, if you were to click on that, it would actually open it in read mode. One of the important icons that we see that's different with a library is usually the second column, but it could be in a different spot. And this is just a little icon that tells us what kind of document it is. In other words, is it Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF, an image? Because every single item in a library must have an attachment, you're always going to see an icon here that will help you identify what it is. Notice if you pause over that icon, it tells you the actual file name, including the extension. So this one ends in .docx, so I know that that's one of the later versions of a Word document. And the one down here is, of course, a PDF. Not only can we change the views of libraries by using any one of the normal view options that we have, but we also, of course, can sort and filter by any one of the columns by using the drop-downs at the top or the ribbon options. With that little review out of the way, because it's all the same as a list, let's talk about how we actually upload files. There are a couple of ways, actually about 3 different ways that you can do this in SharePoint. The first is probably something that you've done before, and that's just like uploading a file from anywhere. If you've done that on the internet or from your network, it's going to be very familiar. We'll go ahead and access that by clicking on the Files tab in the ribbon. The second option in from the left in the new group says Upload Document. If you give that a click or a tap, it kind of grays out the background and brings up a somewhat typical upload window. It gives us the opportunity to add a file by simply browsing for it. We'll go ahead and click on Browse. I'm going to be uploading things from my Working Files folder, which I have stored on my desktop, and the Chapter 5 folder. You have access to all of these files as well, or feel free to go ahead and use your own files. It doesn't matter what you upload here as long as you're uploading appropriate types of files. And since we're in a document library, any file will do. I actually want to go ahead and upload a couple of things. We'll go ahead and start off with some labels, some 5160 labels that are a Word document. We simply navigate to and find the file, click Open, make sure that the path is exactly what we want it to be, click OK, and wait for it to upload. And since this was a very small file, it takes literally just half a second or so. We can now see our new file is listed here, and it has a little icon next to it telling us that that is a new file. On the right-hand side, it tells us it was modified a few seconds ago, and if you hover over that, you can actually see the date and time that it was uploaded. That can be useful if the work that you're doing is time-sensitive. It also, of course, has Michael Brooks, because I am currently working as Michael Brooks. He's the person who didn't modify it, but actually added it to begin with. So that's easy enough. We can upload one file at a time, but that can get really slow. What if you needed to upload more than one file at a time? Have no fear, we can do that as well. We can still go back to Upload Document in the ribbon, Or, of course, we can still use the New Document link at the top of the list. That one's always available. But notice when you do that here, we get something that's a little bit different than what we saw a moment ago. New Document actually means create a new file. We're going to demonstrate how to do that in a separate video, so we're going to close that for just a moment. The options actually are to use the Upload Document option, or you can actually do drag and drop. Especially if you have multiple monitors or if you have a lot of files to move, sometimes just opening up Windows Explorer, putting it beside your SharePoint window, or Alt-tabbing between your windows lets you cut and paste or copy and paste much more quickly. I'm going to show you how to do it, though, going back to where we started, which is the Upload Document command. The reason is it's the exact same window we started with, but there's a link at the bottom that says Upload Files using Windows Explorer. We'll give that one a tap. And what we're now seeing is our SharePoint site, just like we would see it as if it was part of our network. Now, this goes back to what I've been trying to tell everybody all along, which is SharePoint is a website. It is on a SharePoint server, and it does have all kinds of wonderful technology behind it, but it's more similar than different to what you're used to. It is still just a location on a computer server, on a network. It happens to be on, in this case, my network. It gives a SharePoint site. It's in a folder called Team Site. It's in another folder called You Got It. And then finally, our library is something called Shared Documents. That's wonderful news because what it means is when you can open it in Windows Explorer, or if you're in Windows 8, just Explorer view, then we can cut, copy, paste, even rename files right here, which makes it a lot easier to work with. I'm not going to go through that process because you all know how to go out and grab things from other locations, cut them or copy them, and paste them. I just wanted to show you that this view is much more usable if you ever need to move or manage a lot of files that are within one library. We'll go ahead and close this down. And then, of course, we can close down the dialog box for adding a document. We added one more document, but we also now know that we can drag and drop, and we also can use Windows Explorer view, 3 different ways to get documents into a document library. The last thing I wanted to discuss before we're done with document libraries, though, is to remind you that every file has properties. They always have. Most people just don't use them. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be using them. So once we get files into SharePoint, we should take a look at those properties and make sure that they are complete. How do we do that? Well, of course, we're going to learn very quickly that everything in libraries is pretty much done from the Open menu. We don't have to do it that way, but we certainly can. You never know what you're going to find in properties because a lot of times people have reused files so many times and never looked at them that there could be information so old that it's kind of like a time capsule. So let's go ahead and take a look at these labels. That's easy. If we take a look at the ellipsis or the Open menu, give that a click, we get to see one of the great new features of SharePoint 2013. It's technically called a callout. And what it does is it gives us a lot of information without really having to open the file or open a lot of other windows. It tells us the name of the document at the top. It even gives us a preview. Now, this one isn't very exciting, but remember, this is mailing labels. So here's a label, here's another label. They are 3 across by 11 down. It tells us in this preview that we're on page 1 of 1, and we can actually do some different things with the preview. It says when it was last changed. It can tell you who it's shared with. In this case, it's shared with lots of people. And at the bottom, it gives you the option to edit the document, to share the document, to follow the document, or our favorite ellipsis that gives us more options than that, which in this case would be to view the properties, edit the properties, view it in the browser, edit in the browser, check it out, workflows, or download a copy. Oh my gosh, yes, that's a lot. Remember, though, this is a document or a file, so we would expect to be able to do a lot of things with it. Right now, we're just focusing on kind of reviewing things. So we're going to go in and say Edit Properties. This opens up the property sheet. We also could have gotten there by simply going up to the ribbon and choosing View Properties from there. This is a very typical property sheet. It gives us the name of the document, but what we can see is a lot of the rest of the information is blank. For a majority of your documents, I strongly urge you to add in all of the properties. It doesn't seem like it's necessary, but complete information makes things more searchable, more findable, more usable, and more useful for people, especially in the future. So this one will be simple. all we need to do is add a title. That's the only other option that we have for properties with this particular document. So we'll say training course titles. And of course, they are labels. Now, I know that's pretty much repeating what the name of the file was, but these are two different properties, and they can be used for different things. Just as an example, this title could be used to automatically create headers and footers. It's there, it's easy, we click on Save, and now you know how to access, to view, and even to modify the properties with any one of your documents that's in a library. You know by now that I like to keep things simple, and I like to draw correlations to the similarities between things. So we've been working in a document library, which is the most commonly used library, but now we want to take a look at some specialty types of items. Primarily, let's take a few minutes to take a look at a picture library.